Hello, I'm Dr. Ali Mohammadi. I'm Assistant Professor of English Language and Literature in Istanbul Yeniyazil University. My paper title is Mythological Influences on the Works of J.R.R. Tolkien, a Scrutiny of Middle-earth Stories. To begin with, I should say that the presentation I'm going to make today is an attempt to investigate the influence of mythology on J.R.R. Tolkien's literary works in general, and on Middle-earth in particular. Moreover, despite the fact that mythology is actually regarded as a thing of the past, predominantly found in the early works of literature, this inquiry that I have done reveals that how modern literary works can artistically benefit from mythological elements of Old English era, so as to enrich their content and stand out actually as an innovative masterpiece. Indeed, having been a philologist and well acquainted with mythological literature, J.R.R. Tolkien paved the way for a novel and new understanding of literature by bridging the gap between the old and the new, to be exact. Primarily, I should also mention that literary value of fantasy genre would not be much as today if there was no man named John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, who is regarded as father of modern fantasy. With his unprecedented and immortal work of art, Middle-earth Legendarium, he not only has become the pioneers of fantasy genre by creating the most extensive fictional universe, but also laid the foundation for a new era of novels for both readers and writers. His effect on the upcoming writers, including his son, Christopher Tolkien, can be clearly seen on their works and speeches, although it would be inaccurate if one thinks that he was all alone while designing this vast universe, because there were many influences that contributed to Middle-earth creation process, the most important of which are his interest in mythologies and passion for creating an English mythology, which was absent, obviously, compared with other mythologies like those of Greek, Celtic, Scandinavian, Finnish, etc. As a matter of fact, Tolkien underscores this incompleteness, incompleteness of mythology in his own culture, as the poverty of his own beloved country, namely England, in his dedicated letter to Milton Waldman, who was an editor interested in and followed Tolkien's works. To fulfill his long-lasting passion, which had been pursued from his childhood, Tolkien dedicated his life to making up imaginary stories, languages and worlds constantly, so that this accumulation of knowledge enabled the Legendarium to be composed. While designing the masterpiece, namely Middle-earth, many sources of inspiration helped him to actualize and craft Middle-earth components. In this research, actually, I examined the most crucial and indispensable parts of these sources, that is, mythological influences, and their effects actually on his works, namely Middle-earth. By putting his works under the scope of these influences, mythological influences, I also compared them with Tolkien's own mythology, the mythology that he himself actually created, to indicate how it was affected by other mythologies. The creation of Middle-earth and its epic stories were actualized partly because of Tolkien's deep admiration for rich mythologies such as Greek and Celtic mythologies, and reflection of them in his pen. Among these mythologies, the most effective on both Tolkien's authorship and personal life is Norse mythology. And by Norse mythology, I mean N-O-R-S-E, the Norwegian language, especially in an ancient or medieval form, or the Scandinavian language group, so to speak, also known as Scandinavian mythology. In its effect, undeniably, I should say that his actually Middle-earth effects undeniably shows itself on all the works created by him. even on the ones unrelated with Middle-earth. There is also one more thing I need to mention. It's the deep influence of Norse cultures, Scandinavian cultures, and mythology on Tolkien's pen, thereby his greatest work, Middle-earth Legendarium, and its vast universe can be evidently seen by comparing it to Nordic folk tales and epics in terms of their world, atmospheres, structures, history, and characters. Tolkien's biographers, Humphrey Carpenter, proves this impact by stating that Old Norse or Icelandic mythology and literature had a profound appeal to Tolkien's imagination. Essentially, it is highly probable and possible that the name of Middle-earth, where all the stories occurred in, originated from Midgard, the planet where, of course, it's a Greek name, it's a planet where mortals from 9 worlds dwell, according to Scandinavian mythology. Not only the names, but also features of worlds are quite similar on both sides, like there's gods and goddesses. The Valors, another Greek name, of course, it is a sort of deity in the Middle-earth. The Valor, I'm talking about the group of the Valors, have analog characteristics and depictions with Asgard gods. This is also, Asgard is a sort of, again, Greek, actually, mythological name. For instance, Thor, another mythological name, which is the most well-known mythological figures of all time and depicted as the most powerful god in a Scandinavian mythology, is the source of inspiration for Valors. In Middle-earth, Ol is also another Greek mythological name, who brought dwarves, dwarves are small creatures, shorter than humans, into existence in Middle-earth, which resembles Thor in terms of having possession of an angelic hammer as a weapon and being forgers, together with Ol and Ormi is also another Greek name, the Vala, who fights against Melkor's monsters. Melkor is also another mythological name Tolkien has coined, and Tulkas, another name. The physically strongest Vala have also several characteristics in common with Thor. It goes without saying that J.R.R. Tolkien was absorbed in languages. He specialized in philology, which led him to be an expert linguist. Consequently, he worked on a project to create fictional universe called Middle-earth, some significant aspects of which I demonstrated in my study. Indeed, whenever mythology is mentioned, the very first thing comes to mind is Greek mythology in the first place, which is one of the most, obviously, famous ancient mythologies. However, Finnish mythology inspired Tolkien's works a lot more than its Greek counterpart. Despite Tolkien's rejection of it, influence of Finnish mythology in Tolkien's Middle-earth cannot be denied whatsoever, since creation of this fantasy world resembles Kalevala, another Greek mythological name, which is the most popular Finnish epic, so to speak. To look from a different viewpoint, the Legendarium written by Tolkien can be compared with the Homer's masterpiece, the Iliad. Well, Bilbo's stealing the ring from Smeagol, again it's of course a mythological name, and Sauron to awaken and encouraged him to bring every being to his knees, since the absence of the one ring lapsed the Dark Lord into silence. On the other hand, Helen's runaway with Paris was an igniter for the king, Agamemnon, to attack Troy, whose purpose was to be the king of the whole Greece. Put differently, as Troy was not the story of a war, which was actually about the powerful warriors, the Achilles, the Lord of the Rings, was the story of Aragorn. Aragorn actually is another mythological name, who is to end Sauron's malignment and make Middle-earth a peaceful place to live in. If we are to talk about the Tolkien's legacy and his references in his masterpiece, Middle-earth, we cannot ignore his academic life and the inevitable role of English history. In his works, a world of influences can be seen from Anglo-Saxons and Celts, Tolkien was a distinguished philologist from a generation of philologists among whom great profundity and breadth of linguistic knowledge were normal. Actually, he specialized particularly in Anglo-Saxon. J.R.R. Tolkien was Rawlinson and Bosworth professors of Anglo-Saxon literature between the years 1925 and 1945. Later, he became Merton professors of English language and literature until 1955. Having known this immense literary knowledge cannot be doubted actually whatsoever. In other words, he's highly erudite and is of a paramount and considerable amount of literary knowledge. Tolkien was acquainted with Celtic languages and legends. However, he stated a distaste and kind of hatred in Celtic legends and rejected Celtic influences of his legendarium. I mean, his actually masterpieces. Tolkien had noted the obscurity of the word Celtic as an arbitrary catch-all term. In inauguration speech at the University of Oxford, he announced that Celtic of any sort is, however, a magic bag into which anything may be put, out of which almost anything may come. Nonetheless, there are lots of concepts taken from Celtic legends, such as elves. Elves are also mythological names, which heavily occupy the main story of Middle-earth legendarium. Finally, it will be unfair to say that The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, the Silmarillion, and most importantly, Middle-earth legendarium were made only by Tolkien, as it can be tangibly observed in this study, in my research. Mythological influences played undeniable role, without which there would not be such works whatsoever. All writers and readers, particularly those who are concerned with modern fantasy, should presumably be grateful to J.R.R. Tolkien due to harmonizing nearly all the mythologies in such an exclusive and enviable manner. In the end, had mythology not been utilized by Tolkien, his works and, on top of all, Middle-earth, and I call it again his masterpiece, would not have turned into a modern literary showpiece. Thank you so much for listening.